I mean, this goes to another question about Stephen Miller and his view of a powerful executive. I want to get to that, but let's stay on the immigration views. There's a tweet, and he tweets a lot, as we know, and he tweets very frankly about his views. There's a tweet, someone should write an alternate historical novel where Americans are the first to master the automobile, the first in flight, the first to harness the atom, the first to land on the moon, but just keep going and never open our borders to the entire third world for 60 years. Basically, what he's saying is American innovation all happened because white men, I mean, that's the interpretation here, did all of these things, and then the country lost focus because it started letting in the, quote, third world. McKay, come back to California.
Yeah.
I mean...
Because I do think that's crucial to understanding his fixation on immigration.
Yeah, first of all, it's ahistorical. I mean, Americans invented plenty of things at the same time that immigrants were coming into the country. In fact, many of the people who were immigrants invented those things as new Americans. But go into this, the visceral feeling against immigrants.
I mean, look, obviously none of us can read his mind, but I think that to understand how these views formed, you have to understand the post-9/11 politics on the right in Southern California in particular, right? Post-9/11, there was a general kind of rise in xenophobia, fear of, Muslims, outsiders, foreigners. We had been through this national trauma. It's understandable to a certain extent, but Miller's particular fixation on immigration was really born of the right-wing media ecosystem in California at the time, which was always rotating around immigration issues. I think that if he had been, born in Cleveland or Montana or, even, Washington, D.C., I think it would have been a very different story. But the people that he idolized, the local talk radio people on the right, the kind of group of conservatives he fell in with, were always talking about immigration. And so...
extremely negatively.
Of course.
But the only reason I say that is because Ronald Reagan, the greatest Republican in the history of California, was not in that camp.
Right. Something had shifted in the decades after Reagan. Some of it had to do with the right-wing backlash to George W. Bush's attempt to find a grand immigration compromise. But because he was always on the far right of the Republican Party, and because he came from California, immigration was kind of a natural wedge issue that he latched on.
So what was it? Growing up in Southern California, he saw Hispanics, he saw the Latino population as just too big, trying to dominate white America?
Well, there's sort of two things. You're talking about the post-9/11 Republican sort of backlash, against real efforts to actually have some sort of comprehensive immigration reform. What you saw was sort of a xenophobic view where you generalized many immigrants coming from the Middle East as national security threats, and you've seen that rhetoric replicated by this administration. But then when it comes to also immigrants coming from Central and Latin America, you've had, and this still exists today, this real push by conservatives of this is economic competition with people that are born in the States. Now, of course, economic studies do undercut that and show that immigrants broadly actually benefit the economy. But this is a prime example for the white grievance argument, right?
I want to stay on that for a second because Stephen Miller is Jewish, and part of his family came over here 100 years ago as refugees from anti-Semitism in Europe. When you're in your conversations with him, does that ever play into his understanding of the world and his own background as the great-grandchild of immigrants?
I'm going to introduce one data point, which may or may not be relevant, but he told me one of the books that most shaped him was Wayne LaPierre's book, the head of the NRA.
Right.
In that book, Wayne LaPierre makes an argument that the Holocaust, and I think he says something like Auschwitz, are prime examples of the need for Second Amendment rights. That to make what you will of that argument, but that if the Jewish people had been armed, they would have been able to stand up to this authoritarian genocidal regime. I think that he found a way early on to kind of meld his general right-wing worldview with his Jewish identity and background. I think it became a little more strained as he got deeper into Trump-era right-wing politics and found himself kind of swimming in waters that were, let's say, a little bit less friendly to Jews.
Yeah, I mean, because there's an element of, let's call it the racialist far right, that doesn't have fond feelings about Jews. Can I make just one brief editorial aside? I'm sorry, this prompts this thought. I wish that the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto had more guns back then, but I don't think that they still would not have been able to defeat the German army. I mean, it sounds like it's just a kind of anyway, put that aside for now. We'll do a special episode. Yeah, I'll bring it up with Wayne LaPierre the next time he's on the show.
The thing I would just add to that, too, is when you look at Stephen's comments about immigration, he does have a very narrow sort of view of which immigrants are justified to be in the United States. And it doesn't always track with the law. Like, if you go into a legal port of entry at the border, you have a legal process to come in the country. He pushes back against that, right? He pushes back against the parole system the Biden administration started. They've revamped their refugee program to focus on English-speaking refugees coming into the U.S., and not from predominantly African and also Muslim-majority countries, too. So there's a through line there of who he thinks is deserving to be in the US.
This is why South African Afrikaners are given privileges
pretty much allowed
in that system.
You
know, I want to talk a little bit about his power in the White House. And I came into direct contact with this question last year during the Signal controversy when I was in that chat. J.D. Vance, everyone else, Marco Rubio, are in that chat and arguing back and forth about the utility of striking Yemen. And then Miller comes into the chat and writes, as I heard it, the president was clear, green light, but we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. And that shut down the debate. It shut down J.D. Vance. Kind of made me think, well, Stephen Miller is worth a half hour on Washington Week, if that's the case, that he's so powerful. Talk about inside the White House, what kind of power you saw.
It's hard to overstate his power inside the Trump second-term White House, in part because his purview is so much broader than just immigration, although it certainly includes immigration, but it includes trade, it includes foreign policy, it includes national security, it includes education, the entire war on the quote-unquote elite university system. Stephen Miller, in his free time, when he's not dealing with immigration, is the architect of that. And also, it's, you know, you were asking earlier if his views had become more extreme. I think it is instructive to understand him in some of the same ways we understand President Trump himself, which is that his views haven't necessarily changed, but he used those even more than Trump in certain ways. Stephen Miller used those 4 years out of power to basically get better, stronger, faster, more ruthless. And he understood the mistakes he made in the first term, why the travel ban, EO, he wrote the first time, led to chaos at the airports. Executive order, led to chaos at the airports and got struck down in the courts. This time he knows that if you care about being hardline on immigration, it's not just important to have your people at the Department of Homeland Security, although that is important, but there's certain positions at Health and Human Services where you want a strong ally with your point of view. There's certain jobs in the State Department, in the Western Hemisphere division. So he knows now all the levers of power.
Right. But, Leanne, let me ask you this. Minneapolis, Tom Homan comes in and says, well, we're pulling out. Obviously, it did not go well. No. Certainly from a public relations perspective for the administration in Minneapolis, largely because of the 2 deaths caused by ICE agents, of protesters. Did Stephen Miller go too far this time?
It seems that way. Yeah, I think that a couple things. On his standing in the White House, he had a 40th birthday party that his wife, Katie Miller, hosted for him back in the fall, or the summer, actually. Every people who attended told me that they have never seen so many people in the administration in one place. It was every single cabinet member, official, Caroline Leavitt, just everyone was there.
You needed like a designated survivor who didn't go to the party.
Exactly. And it was a show of how important he is in this administration. It was also notable that there was no members of Congress there except for the Speaker of the House. which gets back to your question, did he go too far? This is something that the president has gotten a lot of pushback on. Stephen Miller has been criticized very publicly by Democrats and very privately by Republicans.
Although Senator Tillis, a prominent Republican, does not like him at all and has told the president that.
Despises. Every single time he can publicly say how much he hates Stephen Miller, he does it. He will be talking about something totally different to a reporter, and he will bring up Stephen Miller.
He's also retiring.
He is also retiring,
Which
but
is
he does.
interesting.
He does have a line to the president, and he has told the president many times that that Stephen Miller is doing him and the Republican Party no justice.
We did see something rare after the Preddy shooting, too, on Miller, which was him also sort of try to clean it up and say, well, look, I was getting information from CBP agents. There was a period there where they tried to soften that language. That's rare.
McKay, let me ask you this. What does he ultimately want? And by the way, you have like 30 seconds to answer that question.
Well, I think that he wants a lot. But I think when it comes to immigration in particular, I think that you guys are right. He has made it very clear, and even in my conversations, that he wants to entirely reframe our national understanding of our country as a nation of
He's basically in an argument with Emma Lazarus, in a kind of way.
Right. I mean, there's a key moment in the first term where he was asked about the placard at the base of the Statue of Liberty.
That's the poem. Yeah.
And he completely dismisses it, like it disdainfully dismisses it. And I think that is his ideological project. If he can retire in a country that does not see immigrants as being welcome into this country, that does not see immigrants as part of the national story, he will be happy.
He's a fascinating figure, obviously the most powerful non-elected official. I think we can all agree on that, more powerful than cabinet officials. We'll talk about him again and again, obviously, but that's all the time we have for now.